You're the only person I've ever interviewed who brought notes.
No, I don't actually have notes. I just have things to make notes.
Oh, okay.
Ironically, my first diary was given to me in 1963 by a guy that you would know called John Whitsick.
Yeah. And
he said, fill it up. This is when I first went to Hawaii on the first trip with Midget and Kevin Platt. And I've kept a diary ever since, and I pretty much know exactly where I am and what I'm thinking pretty much every day, because in the afternoons I just write down what the details are, and it's always been, it's kind of, that's what I do, you know. I just keep notes on where I'm thinking and what I'm playing, and then, you know, when I got to this new book, I could simply ask my wife. I was laid up with a knee replacement, a full knee replacement, not just a little one where they cut the tibia and cut the femur, and I was in bed for 8 weeks. So I started to write again, and I could write basically from my diaries. So I asked my wife to go and get, for example, this is not true, but from 1975 diaries, and all they are is key points.
Okay.
So here it would say that I'm working with Surf Splendor, David Scales, and I'll talk about where we go with this, you know.
Gotcha.
Whether it was whether I felt good about it or not, you know. And then later on I can reflect on that as far as if I ever wanted to write about it. So that's how the new book was written, and that's actually how Nat's Nat was written too, you know.
So I started journaling at the beginning of this year, like a New Year's resolution. My mom, actually I've got it right here. My mom got me this. It's basically a 1-sentence journal. And if you go to any given day, there's 5 entries, basically one for each year for the next 5 years. So the idea is that you write in today's entry, and next year when you get to this page, you could see what you wrote in 2019.
That's a good idea.
Kind of is. And the 1-sentence thing makes it very manageable. If you're not used to the discipline of journaling every day.
Yeah, well, that's right. You know.
For me, it's like writing a whole paragraph or even writing for 20 minutes feels daunting, or I just don't have the time. This, 1 sentence I could always get to.
Yeah.
You know?
I think anything to, some people just don't want to be disciplined like that. You know, some people have just got so much going on in their lives they can't even fit it in. It's just that there's a few things in my life that are really important, and this is one of them. To fill in the diary, and meditation is another thing, which I've been doing since 1974, 73. And, you know, you just have to have things that are important for you that are a part of your life, you know, and kind of like the same with surfing, you know, like if I don't do that consistently, then I don't feel like I'm in balance, you know.
Right.
And I can substitute skiing for it to a degree, but I need to consistently ride waves and be around nature, be around the ocean, and that's nature's good, but it's not the same as actually having that physical adrenaline rush of riding waves.
Right. Back to writing. You mentioned that a lot of the benefit is being able to reflect on it later, and it serves as an outline for writing longer pieces. Do you find any catharsis in the act itself?
No. I don't these days write physically, you know, anymore, you know, other than the journal or the diary, as I call it. But I don't really type very well at all, but what I do is I'm impressed by computers if I'm just using them for that function. I don't want to know about all the other functions of my MacBook Pro, other than the fact that I can sort of step through things and come back to it and edit and move around, and I think as long as I keep that in perspective, that's just fine. I don't want for anything more out of it. You know, how all these things offer all these options, and I don't want any more options. I just want to be able to type with it and to be able to save it and be able to edit it, and then I'll give it on to an editor who's much more together than I am about the English language.
Gotcha. Do you read?
Read a lot.
You do.
I just finished 3 books on a 3-book trilogy by Jack's second name. Anyway, the last one was The Guardian, and it's really the story of you've all heard of Braveheart, right? And well, this guy, my family. I read this last trilogy because they were the story of the Douglas clan, and that's my mother's family history.
Oh, really?
So I find that really interesting because I can just really not. He didn't do the right thing by William Wallace. He sort of was treacherous and said that he was, but he was an earl, so he sucked up. He thought the power was going to be with King Edward and that whole thing, and really, he should have stuck with William Wallace and that whole thing of what was happening in Scotland, but he didn't. And he said that he was, and then he changed his mind, So it's interesting for me to read somebody that, of course, I'm connected, so I'd like to know just sort of exactly how we got there and why we did that and what were the circumstances. And, the fact of not supporting William Wallace was probably one of the silliest moves he ever made, but he stuck with the winning team, and the winning team was the English because of so many issues. Even just their longbows meant that they could fire an accurate arrow twice as far as the traditional Scottish bow. And once again, it was the church that really where a lot of that information comes from. And that to me is one of the best things about the church. I don't know how long in Australia, all the churches have been taking a hell of a beating of late, over pedophilia, and I see that as probably for society in general as a bad thing because a lot of these people are really well-meaning and they really do a good job, but unfortunately it's like the bad apple, and it's really bad for the Catholic Church, because...
Yeah, it's terrible. PR for them, terrible optics, but...
I wonder how long our church will last.
What's our church?
Our church is the Church of the Open Sky.
Yeah.
Tom Blake's words, right from the top.
I heard you say that you think surfing could be bigger than the Catholic Church and certainly more meaningful.
Well, the thing is that you've got to think about grandchildren's grandchildren. Now, I know that all my grandchildren are going to be surfers, and I'm only dealing with 4 of them. But if you start to multiply that out, and you multiply by how many surfers are in California, and then how many surfers are in the world, and how many wave pools, and how many skate parks, and we're talking, this is going to be a force certainly to be considered. And possibly, we have a unique situation in Australia that you don't have here. What we have is we have one of the 9 people that just really is involved in constitutional law is a surfer. So one of our Supreme Court judges is and you refer to him as a justice, and that's exactly what he is. They make the laws of the country, and when you start to get that sort of influence where the actual people in power have surfer consciousness, he doesn't surf anymore. He can barely see. He's 87, I think, and it's very difficult to think. I was at a luncheon with the Australian Surfing Lawyers Association the other day. They were just buying books because we did a thing, Rabbit and I, with Surf Aids, what a great organisation that is for sure. And so the Australian surfing lawyers support them heavily. So what I was doing was helping with that support and also selling a bunch of books for Penguin Random House, who happened to own this book. They bought it off me, but I still want to do the best job I possibly can,
Of course.
You got to do a good job. You got to finish what you start,
And you want people to read the book too.
I was just, because it's, it's coming from greater or lesser situation as one of the tribal elders. And I'm not even saying that that's totally unique. There's thousands, especially in California, there's thousands of tribal elders out there. And I'm just happened to be one who was reasonably well connected and in the right place at the right time. In other words, Yes, I was involved in the shortboard. No, I didn't design the shortboard, but I could ride the bloody things, and I knew exactly how to shape one.
Yeah.
Basically through McTavish.
Sure.
But was that any more than what Dick Brewer, he achieved significant things with the shortboard too. So it's a difficult situation to say who did what first. And in this book, I think I pretty much nail it. That what it is I believe in idiosyncrasy. I believe that if people are searching for the same thing, and they were in that period, late 60s, that we all happened to hit on the winning combination at a similar time.
Sure.
And it's the same thing with I was shaping boards with 3 fins right in the same surfboard factory as Simon Anderson when he came up with the act of the thruster. My one, I just didn't happen to have the right combination, and Simon did, I just think you've got to really consider all these, there's so many facets to everything, and it's really interesting, I think.
Well, with design, lots of times it's in the ether, it's like everything is happening. And so different parts of the world are kind of accessing all of the information and coming to the same conclusions simultaneously.
Yeah.
And one thing makes it to market. The reason why something makes it to market and takes off could be a lot of different variables at play. It could just be marketing.
I can tell you for sure with the thruster, it was because it worked better than any other 3-fin.
Simon's worked better.
Simon's worked much better than my one.
Oh, okay.
And I was building exactly the same thing with a bigger centre fin. And many, many people, I sold hundreds of them.
So why did his work better?
They work better because of the combination of having a small centre fin and behaving sort of with the difference of being slightly more single fin in feel than a twin fin. When the twin fin was just too loose. I mean, MR made me a twin fin for a trip I did to the East Coast one year. And I couldn't keep the thing in the water, even in 3-foot surf. And, I needed something more to hold it down, just for my style of surfing. MR doesn't need that, he didn't need that.
Yeah.
And so the twin fin feel was a whole different way to go, whereas the single fin thing was not really loose enough. So the combination had to be right how much actual area of fin was on the bottom of the board and the placement.
Gotcha.
And that's why it worked so well for Simon,
Gotcha.
And for the millions of people who bought it after that.
That are still riding them.
Yep, exactly.
I wanted to discuss your graceful exit from professional competitive surfing in the mid-'70s. A decade prior, you had ushered out Phil Edwards and led the shortboard revolution, winning events and a world title, but it seemed that just as quickly you seemed to accept that something new was happening in the 70s, and you gracefully bowed out. So, this is something that we actually don't see that often in professional surfing. We see some of our greatest surf champs struggle to keep up with progression and maybe a reticence to acknowledge one's own limitations. For you, Michael Peterson seemingly stepped into your role of being a dominant competitive surfer. Tell me about your reason to exit competition, and was there a specific moment with MP that instigated it?
Well, he did it better than I did, and I could very easily.
So tell me about that. Like, what was it? What was there a specific moment that you recognized that happening?
Yeah, he came to stay with me one time. I'm not sure which book I wrote this about. It must be in Church of the Open Sky, I suppose. But it's about he came to stay with me after a surf at Lennox Head one time, and it was he was just. I realised out in the water there was probably only a half a dozen of us, and I think I realised that sort of he was doing it better than what I was doing, and his turns were more acute. He was pulling in much more later than what I was, and I was still surfing pretty well in those days. But I think that you just sort of, there's a point when you just realise that, this guy or this, particular direction is not something that you really want to do. I mean, once again, Tom Blake said it very clearly to me that competition in surfing is something everybody should go through. fine. I went through it, you know. Kelly seems like he hasn't gone through it, but that's fine, you know. Everybody's got their own pace and their own way. Obviously, I could tell you some funny stories about Kelly and his association with Quicksilver over that. You know, he was given the option to still get his $1 million and get out years ago, but that's what he likes to do. You know, this is what his. But for me, and here I am living on the farm with my wife and one child at that stage, and I'm really having a good time. It's perfect. Pretty much Lennox Head every couple of days. If it wasn't, the swell was from the north, and I was surfing Broken Head or back, and I had good friends with me to surf, and those people are still good friends to this day. One of them's died, but the other two are Californians that came to Australia in 1968, and they're still close mates. I think that you do everything at the pace that you feel comfortable with, and for me, the comfortable pace was to stop competition, and then after an association with a guy called Doug Warbrick, who was one of the owners of Rip Curl, and another guy called, he was the head of the Association of Surfing, Graham's...
Stapleberg?
No, not Stapleberg, the other Graham. I can't believe sometimes that I actually forget things, but I really am getting old because I do forget. And you wouldn't think that I should, but I do. And that's why, essentially, you should keep diaries, then you can refer back to it. But anyway, it's one of those things where you really do have a time for you, you know, to say, I don't want to do that anymore. My son competed, Bryce, this is, and also Bo for that matter, but for Bryce is what I was thinking about. He competed for about 5 years. He's only 26 now. And he didn't start surfing till he was he started surfing when he was like 3, but he didn't really get it together until he was a bit older. I remember in the end of it, he just went, I don't want to do this anymore, Dad. And he was probably 15 maybe.
Yeah.
And I went, fine, don't do it, mate, don't, you know. I think it was and I don't think it was a problem with being beaten. I think it was just whether there's a taste of satisfaction in that.
I know. So the detail that I'm uncertain on, or I want to know how you have such clarity on, is there's tons of things I don't want to do, but they're good for me to do them. And I could see Kelly encountering Andy Irons, and Kelly already had 7 world titles at that point. And he could view Andy the same way that you viewed Michael Peterson and go, wow, this guy's doing it better, differently, completely. Like, I guess now's the time for me to bow out. I've got more world titles than anybody. I could bow out. But there was something in him where he realized he wants competition and he thrives on it. So he buckled down, and now he's won 5 more titles or 4 more titles. And that's probably the right decision for him. And your decision is the right for you.
But my decision was based on the fact that I wasn't, what I'm trying to point out there with Bryce's scenario, there wasn't any more satisfaction in it for me. I didn't really, it wasn't the fact that Michael was that much better than me. I guess I could have, in fact, I did come back and got involved in another contest after that. But I don't really, if it doesn't taste good, why would you do it? And in Church of the Open Sky, I bring up several different people that simply had had enough. Maybe they were only 15, 20 years old. Bryce is a classic one. For me, I thought, you know what? I have a perfect lifestyle. I had really nice sponsors here in America. Dewey Weber Surfboards was paying me every week, just to do my time on the tour here, which was the tour was really just a social interaction with the dealers on the East Coast in those days, and I was doing the best I possibly could. I'd take them to lunch. We'd sell them surfboards, a guy called Mike Tabling and I, and that's what we were basically doing. We were making sure these guys bought our boards instead of Bing's.
Right.
And sometimes we'd win, sometimes we'd lose.
Right.
But that was all a part of the job. And so what I'm saying is that Kelly sees this competitions as a part of his job. To me, surfing is what my job is. I love to ride waves.
Right.
So the reason I was out there surfing today, I see myself as a tribal elder, and I'll surf as long as I possibly can, because I'm going to, and we had particularly good swell this year. We had probably one of the best 3-month periods on the north coast of New South Wales that I've ever seen. I surfed every day except for 4 in good high quality waves.
Wow.
So you just go, that's really what I need. Yeah. I don't need competition. I didn't need competition. I don't think I even needed it when I was younger, but I was doing it. But, you've got to go through it in order to find out what it's like. So even if somebody, is going through it and takes longer, doesn't matter, or takes shorter, or, that.
Well, so then what brought you back to it in the 80s? Because you are responsible, or largely, helped pioneer the shortboard movement. And that's from, like, say, 67 to 71. And then you came back and won 4 longboard world titles in the 80s.
That was an obligation.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because I was on the board of the ASP in those days.
Yeah.
And it was really the fact that they didn't have an understanding of what good longboarding was. In other words, they were trying to judge it like shortboarding, which was a real mistake, because that doesn't really qualify. It's a terrible thing to be judged on points for manoeuvres, when what you have to really do is throw in style, because style is the big element here. And so that was brought home very clearly to the judges, and we got involved heavily, and I like to think that I had a very, very good influence on that. I mean, I know the whole thing's gone out the wall or out the door since then, but at that point, I had to set a benchmark. So they're saying, well, okay, well, what is good style? Why don't you show us? So therefore, I got back into competition, and of course I won, because I had a certain style that was based on something that I've learnt from Midget Farrelly, Phil Edwards. These guys were my role models, but I could give it my twist all the time. But really, I was just surfing the way I really felt was the right style for me. And I think I still surf that way on a longboard now. I mean, that's the way surfboards were turned. You stood on one side and you applied pressure by bending your knees, and it was more of it's quite a subtle thing to do a good drop knee turn, I think. And I really love to do it. And I have to really discipline myself to stay down and then walk out of the turn. And it's not at all like what you do with shortboard surfing.
Right. Matt Warshaw told me that his all-time favorite forgotten surfer is a guy named Bobby Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Bobby Brown to you?
The Church of the Open Sky, I spell it out very clearly. Bobby was a friend of mine, and he was a little bit older than me. He actually was the first guy to beat Midget Farrelly in Australia. I wasn't competing. I was too young to really openly compete with Midget. But Bobby did, because he was a bit older, and unfortunately he came to the end of his time with an argument in the Tarrant Point Hotel over whose 20 cents that was on the end of the pool table, and the guy. Well, the reason that that all was very foggy is, and I don't know because I was not there, of course, but I was pissed off that it happened and that the guy actually walked free, who stuck the beer glass into Bobby's jugular and killed him right there in front of everyone. There's an ugly side to a lot of things when it comes to Australia, and that's one of them. There is a lot of hotels. They do fester a lot of violence, and some of the reactions of some of the patrons are a little extreme, to say the least. I think that you've really got to understand that Bobby, this guy, the guy who killed him, who didn't go to jail because the judge in the end said that everybody was too intoxicated to be able to assess exactly what happened. But the whole of surfing in Australia went into mourning about this. And we were so young in those days. There wasn't that many, I'd been with Bobby just months before that. I didn't go back. We'd spoken, but we didn't even have phones then and communication, Things were really very, very loose, You'd see him because all the guys on the south side used to come to the north side on the weekend to surf with you.
Yeah.
So we all surfed Long Reef, and then we'd go to the pub and then, have a drink. Not us, because Bobby and I were too young, but I mean, I have some fond memories of just him and me getting drunk on some horrible bloody sparkly wine that a guy bought us and gave us in the back of the car. And, my first trip up the coast with Bob Evans was with Bobby and Kevin Platt, both of those guys, it's been good stuff to write about, and good stuff that I actually had. I had diaries to refer to, and also there was certain things there that are fact about the way it all came down. And Bobby's fiance was never recovered, I don't think, And also the family. There were two other boys in the family, two sons. So I guess you just have to sort of grin and bear it and go, shit happens. But it was very unfair, and for Australian surfing, devastating, because he was so artistic. He was such a beautiful surfer. As far as I was concerned, unbelievably fine surfer and an unbelievably nice person. We were good mates.
Yeah. What's responsible for your peaceful perspective on this? You seem to have undergone a transition, is what I mean. Like, your nickname was The Animal, and it was bestowed upon you for your aggression as a competitor. But you were also the recipient of one of the more horrific and famous incidents of surf aggression. How has that incident shaped you?
I backhanded a kid once, and his father decided that he was going to come over, and which is probably fair enough, at least to talk to me about it. But he didn't. He didn't talk to me about it. He just laid into me and beat me into submission, because he was a bouncer at one of the local pubs. And so the end result of that was that that I couldn't prosecute him because I actually had backhanded his son. But the reality was that he couldn't help himself. And he did it to two other people after that.
The bouncer did?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to be the first and last person. This is how he solves problems, not by talking about it, but by actually laying people out. It's what he does when he works in a pub. He was just a bouncer at the door. Right. So he beat the shit out of two people, and basically he got himself into a situation where he was told that he had to, because his legal team said, this guy's got a wife and two kids he's got to support, so you can't put him in jail. And the magistrate agreed with him and said, okay, fine, then what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that you maintain a job to support those people, and when you can't maintain a job, then we're going to put you in jail. So what he did was he beat up these other couple of people and put them in hospital, much worse than me, actually. One of them was, broken arm over his knee, and
yikes.
I mean, he's a heavy guy. It was heavy, but the good thing about all that was that, and I resolved my issues with him. I got together with him after that, after I recovered. We talked about it, and he was always he was always really aggressive, but he had a lot of respect for me. But it was just that he thought that was the time that I should be handled like that, because it's hard to deal with anybody with that sort of mentality. I mean, where somebody smashes first and then talks about it later, which is what happened with me. He smashed me first. I went into hospital for however long it was, weeks, and then we talked about it. But after he did it several more times, then the police had a problem. So the police said, okay, fine, then you're going to have to, you can't keep a job, then you're going to have to move on. you'll have to move out of town. This is a small town, only had in those days 3,000 people in the town. And so that's what he had to do. He left town and he's never been back. You know?
When you spoke to him and you feel like you reconciled with him, do you feel like he had, I don't know, was there any hope of him changing his ways?
No, he just
personally reconciled?
This is a personal reconciliation, but he simply doesn't have, that's the way, he'd come from a bikie background. He's from the western suburbs of Sydney, and he explained it all to me, and I really sympathise that somebody could really think that you can solve problems like that. It's one thing to work as a bouncer, but to actually solve problems with your fists
out in the real world.
Yeah, that's a different way. You know,
right.
He wasn't just throwing somebody out of the pub. He put me in hospital for quite a long time, and it was in a lot of ways. It was good for me, really, because it made me even more respectful of other people, and I would never ever now. I mean, my delight in surfing these days is if I'm paddling and there's some guy out there that's aggressive. We don't really get that much where I live, but just tell him go. I don't need him. The older I get, the less I need. I really don't need that many waves anymore. Like I surfed this morning, I got maybe a dozen waves, and 2 or 3 of them were any good. That's fine. I don't have any desire for any more.
Why is that? And why do you think you needed them in your youth?
Well, because I think when you're young, you're over anxious, and also I don't think with less surfers in the water, you could do that. You know, I mean, it's not a difficult situation to be taking it. And I actually remember there was a time when I really thought that this wave was meant for me. So, which is not true, really. But, I mean, that's how I think in those days I could get away with that, And I had to come to terms with the fact that it's not meant for me. It's meant for a whole bunch of other people besides maybe me, if it all goes right. But you've got to give to receive. There's a lot of lessons that come with age and getting over youth.
So that's actually more to what my question was going to be about with the altercation. Is my perception of your persona from back in the 60s and 70s was the animal. And there was kind of an aggressive, competitive, really competitive streak. And my impression of you now, and certainly from reading Church of the Open Sky, is this more kind of philosophical, contemplative, much less aggressive. Is that an accurate perception?
Yes, because I'm quite certain in my youth I did some things that I really regret, that I should have, and I'm glad I grew out of it. But like anybody who says that they didn't do some stupid things in their past is probably full of shit.
For sure.
So, I mean, I just simply, in some respects, I grew out of. I don't have any aggression in me at all,
really?
On any level. I honestly could care less. My attitude is, I'm lucky to be alive, especially some of the things I've done. So, and will continue to do. I love to live on the edge. I skied 117 days last winter.
Did you really?
And 24 of those was in knee-deep powder. So as far as I'm concerned, that gives me a feeling really similar to surfing, and I think I do it pretty well.
Well, compare and contrast it with surfing. How are they different, and what do each of them provide?
Well, if you're talking about where your head's at, just simply, not physical here, but just throwing your head down a fall line, which is what I think you're getting at, David. That's exactly where I'm coming from. Like, I shouldn't have to think about my breathing, because I know that my breathing, every time I'm turning, I'm breathing out. That's fact. And if I've got to join faster turns, then I can breathe in and out as quick as anyone, because my breathing isn't hampered by smoking cigarettes and if anything, it's enhanced by a bit of pot every now and then, but not too much. I don't get to that because not over any issues, just that I don't really. It just doesn't fit into my day plan, you know. But I don't have a problem with it.
Sure. So what is, we always hear people pontificate or just wax poetic about surfing and all of the spirituality that comes with it, and really paint it as being very unique and different than any other sport.
No, it's not.
You find parallels with skiing?
Absolutely.
Really?
You know, oh shit, yeah. I was just mentioning the breathing, but also just being able to throw yourself down a fall line.
Yeah.
Because, you know, and using your turns to either slow down or speed up on that fall line. That's what I do when I surf. If I make it a long turn, it means that I'm going over there, and I'm going over there as quick as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've got to cut the turn really short, you know,
Yeah.
which is what's really nice about having the right sort of surfboards underneath you and the right skis,
Yeah.
and or snowboard. You know, there's no difference how you're standing on a thing anymore. You know, whether you're standing with your feet in a goofy foot position or a thing. It's just simply what you're accustomed to and what you're comfortable with, but it's all the same.
I ski, not nearly as much as you do apparently, but surfing is unique to me. Like just being, first of all, the finite resource of the waves and not knowing if they're going to be good, you know, and the inconsistent playing surface and all of those things make it feel a little bit more special and unpredictable, certainly more finite, and I have to work harder for it. Whereas if I plan to go skiing this weekend, I know what the conditions are going to be like, and I go and I ski, you know? So that element of it, and just being enveloped in the ocean, I think is different than just going and playing on the surface.
Sometimes I ski every day, you know, during the winter, and I spend the winters up here in America. Sometimes I'll go out and I'll ski 4 or 5 places that I know are potentially good. And if they're not good, I'll go home and read. I'm not, you know, I mean, I have a taste for quality. It's just like this morning, I have no reason to surf. If it would have been better, I would have stayed out longer, and I would have called you when I got in, and I would have said, I can't make it at all today, David.
Yeah.
But essentially, and I'd expect you as a surfer to understand that, because that's kind of the way things work. You know, it's a mentality thing, you know. Like surfing's a state of mind. It's not something that's bloody, you know, everybody goes, oh, but, you know, does that mean you've got to surf every day, or does that mean you have to, you know, be a really good surfer? No. The wives of surfers have absolutely or the girlfriends have really good understanding of what surfing is and how that relates to nature and how it relates to sort of, you know, just the compassion and the fact that it's an addiction. We have to do it as much as we possibly can, you know. Mm-hmm. But also the balance there comes when the fact that, well, hey, there's no waves, you know. Like the surf where I live in Australia stopped 2 weeks ago. It was like, and I turn around and I go, and I had to start the book tour in Victoria, right there in the Surf Museum, and then go to Strapper and do the, you know, and then back to Sydney and into big book tours, and then up to Queensland with the Gold Coast Surf Museum. I mean, and Noosa. I mean, all of this was fantastic, but it meant that the surf had stopped. There wasn't any more surf. There was no more waves. So what I can do is concentrate on the other things.
Yep.
And even here now, I'll concentrate as long as I possibly can, and then hopefully there'll be plenty of snow come. I've had enough of that medium of riding waves.
Have you?
Right now, I surf for 3.5 months every day. And every day was 2 foot to 6 feet to 8 feet to 2 foot to 4 foot. And I only had 3 days off.
Yeah.
And it's a bit too much for me, to be quite honest. But because it's such a strong addiction, there wasn't any way I could turn it down. You know, I get up in the morning, I live right on the beach, I'm looking at the surf. When in doubt, paddle out, you know.
Is that the saying?
Shit, yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I thought on the North Shore it's the exact opposite of that.
Well, it's not that, you know, let's
No, I
face
know,
it,
I'm just messing
Australia
around.
is not the bloody North Shore.
But what I like about everything that you're saying, and I think this is kind of reflective of an older era of surfer that couldn't make, you know, millions of dollars being a pro surfer, is that you've developed all these other interests and hobbies. And I really worry, like now the kids that are on tour are so surf centric from a viewing standpoint of the WSL. They're void of personality. The surfing becomes really homogenized. And I think it's reflective of they're just not pulling any influence from anywhere else. Whereas you are interested in writing, you're interested in politics, environmentalism, skiing, all these other things that make you a more interesting character. Kelly, I think, is a very interesting character. He certainly has a lot of other interests outside of surfing. But I'm glad to hear that you get surfed out.
Well, only through that medium, because
yeah, exactly.
Because
you have other passions in life.
I don't need to play with the water right now. I mean, I've got a brand new board coming, which is fantastic. That I've been managed to talk Ryan Birch into shaping me a new asymmetric 7.3. That's what I surf every day, except when it's really big. I've got an 8.2, like for probably half a dozen days of those, 42 or something I'm telling you about. I need a bigger board, just to catch them and feel comfortable off the bottom. And, but when it comes to everyday surfing, 2 foot through to 4 or 5 feet, 7.3 is just fine. And Ryan's boards, to my mind, they're the same. It's the same design boards that my son Bryce surfs. So, and he actually turned me on to Ryan. Ryan spends a month with us every year, so I'm in pretty good shape. Whereas if he wants to come to the house, I have to make sure he shapes me boards.
Yeah, absolutely.
He understands that.
What about his boards? Do you like? What works well about him?
Well, I love the fact that you've got this almost like a keel fins feeling on your forehand, and which is the longer side, and then the longer side of the curve. And then when you come off the top, you can tweak it so as, because the back on your off the top or on your turning left for me, it's a normal quad fin setup. So what that does is it means that they can turn really sharp if you want them to, but you can also lay them out pretty long. I've used it. I've been doing this for 3 years with asymmetric boards now, and that's really all I ride when it comes to, like I say, everything besides a longboard. And I only use a longboard when it's particularly small, and you can tell sometimes when you look at it and you just go, yeah, I can see that being a really nice place to ride the nose and to do sort of swooping turns. But it's not my preferred style of surfing. My preferred style of surfing is some with a little 4 to 6 foot with a little guts back in the pocket, where you can pull in and then roll it really hard off the bottom and then off the top.
Have you ridden any asymmetrical boards from other shapers other than Ryan?
No.
Do you find any limitation to the asymmetrical design?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
I don't either.
But I haven't. I must say, David, I haven't surfed any of the other boards, so I don't know. I knew of asymmetric boards going back a long way. We all did, So I'm not saying that I have my head in the sand there. I knew what they were like, but it just never really came into my. It wasn't on the dance card. The dance card was sort of when I got in. I mean, and I wouldn't have even. I think I tell the story very clearly in Church of the Open Sky that Ryan and Bryce gave me my first one for for Father's Day about 3 years ago now, where I was just helping them get the boards out of the car, and I said, oh, this is a little corky for you guys, and they went, Happy Father's Day, Dad, so just so sweet,
Yeah, totally.
And they've both been very nice like that, and then after that, of course, I've had one that was too small, the 610 was too small, the 7.6 was too big. You just got to, everybody gets to tweak things for what's most comfortable for them, and you got to catch them. Everybody goes, oh, well, what about, catching them? If you can't catch them, you can't ride them.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's simple shit.
Well, with asymmetry, I was riding an asymmetrical board this weekend. Inevitably, somebody asks me about it. Somebody walking by comments on it and wants explanation. And I feel like for people who haven't ridden them, they look very complicated and they can't wrap their brain around it, and they want a lot of explanation, and they're like, well, what if you go left? What if you go right? And the reality is there's no limitation to the design. It works better generally, in my experience, in all conditions, in small waves, in big waves. There isn't any learning curve. You don't write it differently. You write it exactly like you're used to surfing. But like you said, there's a sensitivity on the heel side that you benefit from. And then there's kind of drive and length on the toe side that you can benefit from as well. And
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't have any desire to change surfboards. None at all. It's all good.
But the asymmetry is an improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I need a new one, because the one over there, Bryce actually, I broke a leg rope one time in some really too big for the leg rope I was using, and the board went on the rocks and had to, they're never the same after you have to. In the old days, we used to think that you never really know them till you repair them yourself, But it's not like that anymore. To get the perfect feel on the bottom, I can't have a dent I don't want anything to really interfere with the flow on the bottom of that board, at all. So it's more a matter of just ensuring that. And anyway, when Ryan gets back from Japan, if he hasn't made it yet, I haven't checked with anybody, but he'll be back soon.
Yeah.
And I'll kick his little ass.
You've written 7 books, I believe.
I don't count them, but I suppose sounds good.
Why write Church of the Open Sky?
I was in bed with recovering from a complete knee replacement, and it seemed to me it was just the most constructive thing I can do. Also, I'd still been writing because, I'm a big fan of the journal, and I'd written a couple of things for the journal the last few years, and only because I've always really liked Honey Bear. Pesman's he was a good, loyal friend.
Is Honey Bear your personal nickname, or?
No, that was his nickname at Surfer Magazine.
Oh, man. I didn't know that detail somehow.
That? Yeah, no. You call him Honey Bear. I still call him Honey Bear.
It's a good description.
Yeah, because he's a big bear,
Yeah, totally.
But anyway, so my thinking there is just that that I had to do something constructive. I was getting up for the physio, but that was a bit too painful in the first few days. So, when I'd lay back down again, I'd get my beautiful wife, Ty, to go and bring me some more diaries. And, I'd start to string things together. And, the stories, like I said before, I've been fortunate enough to have some really good friends. Like in the journal this quarter, they've got the story on that I'd never told before because I didn't actually really want to. But there's a lot of people that have been putting shit on Dora, But I tried to write this. He was my mate, And I don't like people putting shit on my mates, So and I know he was a scallywag. There's no two ways about it. But I kind of love that, and I tell stories in this where you'd go, oh, why would he possibly do that if he's a friend? Because that's just the way Mickey was, and it's same as when it comes to Hollywood. He loved it passionately, but he also hated it even more so. These fuckers had come to Malibu and raped his beautiful woman, and he was just... I really understood his passion for surfing. I loved it. And I wanted to write more stories about that, and so I did,
What do you think the biggest misconception is about him?
Well, that's it, that he was just a thief who was out for everything for himself.
That he didn't have any virtue.
That he didn't have any virtues, but that to me was, it's a great shame that people could see that, that someone likes to play games. I think that's great. I mean, like he made all my, he was giving me tennis lessons in France, and he told me, they said, this is fucking boring. I said, oh yeah. And he said, yeah, I got an idea. So we jumped in the car and we went down there, and he bullshitted. I won't go into all the details because it'll take too long. He bullshitted our way into the Saint-Jean-de-Luz tennis club, started playing with me, started acting like, like I was just a kook and, he needed a real game, and sucked in a couple of Frenchmen on one of the other courts. Push comes to shove. He loses another, more money than we actually had at that stage, because we'd come from Afghanistan and we'd spent, or I'd sort of funded part of that, So he got the people to play for some serious money, like a few $100 for every game, So then we ended up making several $1,000 that day. Crazy. Me by being the fall guy.
Right.
I was the mug.
Sure.
But Mickey, when he decided that it was time to really jump in there and wipe the court with these frogs, that's what he did.
That's classic.
Yeah, and but I never told that story before because, and I saw him do that in once again with the frogs here in Malibu. And I won't even go into whose house it was or what we were doing, but I've seen him do that.
What were you doing in Afghanistan?
We were just simply on our way to coming back to France.
Oh.
And it was simply, we'd been in Nepal, we'd been in Kashmir, we'd been in, it was just, we were traveling.
Not surfing.
No. What we were doing was just, Mickey loved the cultural thing, and so he could play, he loved to play games, played games with me consistently. But I tell you what, I love the games, and I mean, he's a genuine character.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned before, David, we haven't got enough characters. I don't know about what the kids are like now on the tour. I don't really, I think that, you're selling them a little short by saying that there's none that are going to turn into being surfers of more quality than just winning a WQS or a W whatever W it is. But from my point of view, I think that I was fortunate enough, and still there's a few that are still alive, that I get to hang out with people because they like to hang out with people of a similar. I guess it's a similar vintage or era, and those people have varying degrees of influence still in the surfing world, but nothing too significant. They're just really nice. They're nice people that have grown through surfing.
Yeah, I guess on the top level, like on the WCT, the problem is just that they all have sponsors with big contracts, and those sponsors don't want to be painted in a certain light. Therefore, people are reticent to express their views on things, is all it comes down to.
It's a shame, I mean,
it's contrarian to surfing and surf culture.
Yeah, because I don't know that. And you know what? I just tend to always think that, like that surfing will come through in the end, because they're still riding waves, and whatever level, they'll pop out the other end and realise that sort of, they've really had a wonderful chance to turn into sensitive human beings by sort of just playing with nature on this level. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a surfer that's ever polluted the ocean. I mean, maybe some that I don't know about, but intentionally, surfers that throw plastic in the ocean, I've never known anybody, and I'm only 72 years old, but I mean, from my point of view, I've never seen anybody pollute. Whereas the thing is that all of this is all wonderful, even what we're doing with our recycling and stuff right now in the Western world. But, you go to places like India or Bali and, and they're just, they're picking up all of this plastic trash off the beach. They take it in big dump trucks 2 miles inland, and the dump trucks dump it in the ocean and dump it in the river. The river comes out at Canggu and comes right out, and all the trash is right back there on the beach again. And then all the people, all the women have to pick up all the trash again and put it in the dumpster. And I don't know how you get around that, the problem of education of people that don't understand, what can really happen, the consequences. It's the consequences all the time. or the priorities. And that's what shits me about sort of people like Trump. You know, their priority. It's not what he's saying is bad. It's just the way. Well, it is bad in a lot of ways, but it's still priorities. You know, like you can put all that in there. You can do all these things, but you have to prioritize things. You have to know that firstly comes the planet. This is our environment, and for us, firstly comes the ocean, and our whole tribe depends on this environment to be sustainable. Mm-hmm. And even if they build wave pools to the degree that they are, and I understand even 3 just came online the last week or something, it's amazing, and I think it's fantastic. But my experience with the wave pool was, it's kind of like, you know, you think that's the real thing? It doesn't feel like the real thing to me. I loved it, but I don't think it's the real thing, you know. It's kind of like sex with a prostitute, I guess.
I think that's a very apt analogy.
Yeah, because it's not the same as having a really good, loving relationship with a woman. You know?
Yeah.
So that's a shame, but I mean, it's a little crude, but not really. I'm trying to just paint a picture of how I see the wave pool thing, you know. And anyway, the real ones are always going to be ridden, they're going to be created by storms at sea, that are beautiful big fronts that we actually, you know, oh, there's one coming, you can't wait till it actually generates a swell tomorrow, and everybody gets excited, you know, and the whole vibe. This is a thing, you know, that happens to it. There's certain elements in surfing that no other activities in the world have it. You have that with skiing to a degree.
I was just going to ask.
They don't do things like the paddle out.
Right.
The paddle out is our culture. This is where primarily all those people you're talking about, that are the old people or the people that are surfed 50 or 60 years ago, people even older than me, you know, they'd relate, because to paddle out and actually join hands in the celebration of someone having a wonderful life as a surfer is really a spiritual thing. And I feel so, I'm so happy to be a part of that. And I'm so happy to be a tribal elder in the whole thing. Not that it's that I'm not that unique. There's bloody thousands. I mean, there was 50 out in the water this morning. You know, I think it's great to even be a part of the fact that the tribe is really strong out there and getting stronger.
Yeah. What surf media do you follow at this point?
It's a hard question, because I don't. Only for me, if I want to be flippant about it, I say none. But if I want to get into it, you know, and think about sort of what do I really look at, you know, I look at the thing with Matt Warshaw, because I'm interested, and because I've known Matt for so long, and we've had our ups and downs in our relationship. But essentially, I respect him. I think he's got a good mind, and I think he does a good job. And he's doing sort of what someone in his capacity should do. The only magazines I really read are in Australia, a thing called White Horses.
Yeah.
Because I used to love Gray, and what Gray actually doesn't live too far from where I am. But I mean, I just like the concept of good stories about our tribe, and that's really White Horses. And, you know, as far as the journal, I mean, I've always been a great supporter of pretty much anything that Buddy Pesman was involved in, that he was the backbone of it, you know. Him and Debbie, they're both really so strong, you know. So, I mean, I've loved that. But as far as Surfer Magazine, I think it lost its way a long time ago, and I don't think it stands a chance of coming back, because I think that it's dead and buried, really, you know, unfortunately. And that I don't like the big media houses being involved in surfing. I don't think they deserve to be a part of our culture. Yeah. And it's like the big publishers. Like, this was a big deal for me to get involved with Penguin Random House with this book.
Okay.
I mean, the fact is that they gave me, they came to me and said, "Oh, we hear you're writing another book." And I said, yes. And they said, "Well, we'd like to buy it off you." Because they knew that, you know, Nat had sold 84,000 copies, And but I, once again, that was done for a passion to make a statement about my life. And yes, okay, a lot of people read about it, and it had some good sex and drugs and rock and roll in there because that was my life at that stage. But Nat's like not. I mean, Church of the Open Sky is not like that at all. I mean, because in our tribe, this is something, and even if you don't buy it, if you just borrow it off somebody or you get it as the books on tape or whatever they're called, that other silly system that you go and listen to it.
Yeah.
I actually recorded it.
Did you really?
Yeah, because I'd finished that, and then they wanted me to do Nat's Nat, and that was too hard because that's the book's much. This one's not so personal. This doesn't deal with ex-wives and children, and yes, it is in there, but it's not the same. Nat's Nat was too personal, on that level, But I still think it was an important thing to do, important for me, anyhow, because it was like a purging,
Mm-hmm.
But with Church of the Open Sky, like I said before, there I was in bed. I might as well do something constructive because I enjoy doing good constructive projects, If I wasn't doing that, I'd probably be building something. I can't even get out of bed, so I might as well have Ty get me another diary and see where I can go with this, So many things there that just had to be spelled out. And I'd always been good friends with Mike Hinson. So Mike told me sort of the play of the whole deal with him, and I've still never read any of that in any other magazine, so I know it's all reasonably fresh. And so then also Albie Falzon in Australia and what happened with Morning of the Earth, one of my super good friends that I grew up with and also that lived right around the road from me, a guy called Baddy Trelaw. He, when he was really sick and couldn't do anything to make money anymore, I asked Albie to give him a couple of $1,000, and Albie wouldn't do that. So I was quite disappointed about that, but also I understood that, that everybody's got their way of handling it. I don't, like I said before, it's not my thing, but, Batty died, and it wasn't right after that. He died like a year or two after when I asked the guy who produced Morning of the Earth to actually give some money to Batty. But, there's silly little things, really, and it was a good thing for me to write about because the actual chapter is called Copyright, which talks about a surfer's rights. So if I say to you, David, okay, then you okay with this guy running a picture of you in his magazine I think that surfers, every time there's a surfer shot, unless like you're talking about with the corporates, So a picture of Mick Fanning, and then, you don't even have to ask bloody Rip Curl whether that's a good idea. They're delighted for you to run the picture. But if it's somebody who's up and coming on the circuit or somebody that's totally not at all, no one at all, it's just some guy out there surfing, then that shouldn't be because he's in a public place to have his likeness procured for a means of making money for a company. I think that there was a lot of things that I really should spell out very clearly with all of this. But really, they're just it's just things that I see, injustices that I see. Mm-hmm. But maybe a lot of people that wouldn't agree with it. But anyway, as I say, it's going to make good reading over the holiday period, and you can tell me whether you like it or not.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to get your philosophy on. By the way, I asked this to. I was up in Whidbey Island 3 weeks ago, and I spent time with Drew Campion. He said to say hello.
I know. It's on my list to call him.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
We go back a long way, and we've been good friends for a long time.
How far north are you headed on this trip?
Just to San Francisco, and then we drive straight over to Sun Valley.
Okay. Yeah. Well, with Campion, he never really answered the question definitively. He fully engaged in it, but just never kind of gave me a definitive answer. And the question is about drug usage. Is it a net gain or a net loss? And he and I kind of spoke about psychedelics in addition to marijuana, and you're welcome to discuss whatever you'd like, but I'll just ask you about weed. With decades of experience to reflect on, do you view usage as solely beneficial, or do you worry that it maybe has mortgaged mental acuity in later life?
Do you ever read Nat's Nat?
No.
Okay, well, you don't really know them, but there's one whole chapter in there where I talk about Wayne Lynch, Ted Spencer, and a guy called, we were making a movie called I can't remember, but anyway, it's basically we were in Morocco in '69, you know, and scrawled on the side of a mosque, "Keef is like a fire. A little will keep you warm, but a lot will burn you." The bottom line on this is that it's like I told you about waves. I don't need that many. I know I'm addicted, but I can make sure that I really govern how many I have, because, you know, satisfaction comes to me by just doing 5 turns with any significance. Satisfaction comes to me. I don't need to get stoned right now in this part of my life. And I feel good about the fact that I don't need to get stoned anymore, like to actually smoke pot. But I tell you what, I'm never going to forget those lessons, you know, and all the things that happened to me. So a little bit is, if it's necessary, and I'll know, everybody will know when it's necessary for them personally to get stoned. You've got to remember the lessons of the 70s and the 80s as surfers and as a human being, and where we really got to, you know. And Drew's the classic example of that, you know. He was writing, you know, his thesis on bloody Bob Dylan, and all about being bloody, you know, while he was just loaded out of his gills, you know. Yeah. And that's a really wonderful thing to do. But you've got to be really, you've got to temper it as you get older. You know, we've got to be guarded about sort of losing the connection that we have. And as soon as you make the connection, you don't fuck it up. Yeah. Don't let it get to a point where you're actually not clear about what direction you're headed in, and about what are important and what the priorities. I mean, I see everything as a surfer, as an elder statesman of surfing, and I don't want to see it any other way. And I really would not advise anyone to get loaded out of their brains for too long, because if you do, you run the risk. I don't necessarily, it may not happen to you, but you run the risk of losing it, you know. And if you lose a connection, like a connection with a woman that you had that was really strong, or with a family that you already, no, be strong. Think of waves, and think about how every time you want to paddle out and it's really big surf, you be aware of what the fuck you're getting yourself into, because the nature will win every time. It'll hold you down, put your foot or its foot on the back of you and hold you under till you're ready to die. So don't take it lightly. Your kind of lessons or comments about balance resonate for me a lot, just probably because of the phase of life that I'm at, trying to suss out, not going full steam into things. And I used to feel the same way as you with surfing. It's like, I need to improve every session. I need more waves. But ultimately, I would get out of the water more often than not frustrated that I didn't progress in my ability level. And so now I've kind of gotten to the point that you're talking about, where just getting in the water is enough. Like getting a wave. I think I use a quote from that wonderful guy up in San Francisco. What's his name? The guy who wrote that beautiful book. He talks about anyway, it doesn't matter. The principle here was sitting out the back and watching the waves come, and the whole roll of the ocean, and the whole the being just in nature like that is a Zen metaphor. Yeah. And it's true, you know. Just even to do that is so good for you, to be at peace with that, you know. And if there's other people all around you, then I tell you, paddle down the beach, gain that, because that sort of clarity and understanding is what you'll only gain as a surfer. you know, and you need space, I think, to do that.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that you meditate. What's your practice and what type of meditation?
Oh, hippie shit. No, I learned it from Ted Spencer, actually, who was a really close friend of mine that I haven't got much contact with anymore, but he was a great Australian surfer and did a lot of very, very good things by surfing, and good things for me. And one of the things was that he turned me on to which basically, I suppose it's like a version of TM, which was, you know, just consistently uttering a mantra to yourself in order to get into a state of not really thinking, I suppose, giving the brain a rest. So I do it just simply to give the brain a rest, because I think that our brains are so active. It's really, and the thing is, the good thing about this sort of stuff is when you get the brain into the habit, then it has to have it. It's addicted too, just like we are to surfing. The brain needs this. And it goes, give me some time off, for fuck's sake, you know. I think that's cool.
Can you share your mantra? Do you have a mantra?
No, it's not. So, yeah, I do, but I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. You could be saying, I eat fucking roast beef, you know. Okay. You can say anything. Well, you know, you can say anything you want as long as it's repetition in order to kick the brain into thinking that that you don't need to think.
Gotcha.
So it's not, you know, it doesn't matter what I say, really.
It's not like you're saying a positive affirmation. It's just the monotony that's
it's
tuning out your brain.
Totally. I don't say anything, you know, like, I mean, you know, you could say, you know, if I wanted to really do it all again now and I go, okay, how are you going to put this together? You go, okay, you know, nature equals God, you know, and then you'd know that Tom Blake was the one, you know. You know, you could do it any other way. You know, it's all you're doing is just is consistently each day putting yourself in a space of not having to think about it.
Gotcha. Do you do it at the same time every day? And
not necessarily.
Okay.
I've been jet lagged lately because I'm dealing with still the clock. No matter how, it seems like the older you get, the more the clock gets affected coming from Australia to America.
Yeah, that's understandable.
I remember it didn't ever really affect me that much in the old days, but now when I get here, it's just... I remember a great tennis player, Guy Vourget, once telling me that when he was travelling on the circuit, one of the best ways to do it was that if I was supposed to be eating my breakfast in the middle of the night or in the afternoon, then I'd do it then.
Really?
Wherever it was. So he'd adjust, he'd take on all of the facets of his actual dietary and sleeping before he went there. So as when he got to Australia, he could compete on a high level without having to physically have to do it like me. Like right now, you know, I had to stay, and I hate staying up more than 9 o'clock. I stayed up till 11:30 last night watching a movie because I'm trying to get out of this
Party
whole
animal.
thing. Party animal, exactly.
The last question for everybody is just, what was the last surfboard that you rode?
This morning, it was a Takayama made by, not Donald, it was made by Tommy Moss. A few years ago when I was here, I asked Tommy to build me a board. I knew he was a good shaper, and he had always, and Donald had schooled him very much in the ways to go about it. So, but I don't know whether it's even that. I think it's more just sort of with HIC. I think were very, very good, positive longboards, and so what basically it probably could have been anybody, but I just needed a longboard for today because you're playing with places with a continental shelf, and there's no real, the wave's not trying to leap over your head. It's doing a nice, easy pitch, and that's so I'd rather surf a longboard sometimes. Actually in California, I think most of the time. I mean, that new board will be here from Ryan, I hope, if he ever comes back next week, and then I'll be able to travel with that because I do intend to surf quite a bit this winter instead of, the reason I want to surf this winter, as opposed to all the other winters, is I'm realising how long it took me to, in the last, say, 5 years, when I first get home in Australia, to adjust to the timing of a wave, jumping up quick enough with the timing of the wave. It's just a pain in the ass. I go over the falls like 3 or 4, probably 4 or 5 times in the first half hour, because especially if it's a solid surf, where there's a good swell. So why do that? There's no real. It's that what you were saying before about the ocean's moving all the time. With snow, it's not moving. It may be the same when you when you lay an edge down in it, but when you're not laying an edge down in it, then that's what you've got to think about. The moving energy is really hard to totally predict unless your head is totally understanding exactly where that energy is going to break. And I know the reefs around where I live really well, but also it gets a little tricky sometimes with, a swell can be only 5 degrees different, and you'll see a different when you're playing with a reef break, and it can make a hell of a difference. You think you're in a good situation, and you think you've got it all together, and then the wave pitches right there and breaks right on your back. It's good.
Well, it's good to hear Nat Young saying that.
No.
To be honest, for all of the intermediate surfers, including myself, listening, who struggle just to get to our feet.
Hold it by the tail, When you get a chance, you grab the fucking thing, Don't let it go, And that's what I've been doing every year, because I get so addicted to skiing and snowboarding that I just think, I should be able to adjust to that when I get back. You can't. I can't. I can't anyway. Maybe other people can, but I can't.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time.
You're welcome.